Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. If you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know that every weekday morning we are chipping away, working our way directly through the book of Matthew, trying to do that from a relatively neutral read, but come on, I have biases, I think things. So I'm trying to disclose that stuff so that we can do our best to let the text speak for itself, try to understand how this would have been received by the original audience, instead of trying to take a bunch of time for you to understand how I think about all the things. If this is your first time here, well, I guess I just told you how all the things are and what we're working on. Hey, welcome to that. I hope you like it. I hope it's fun. I hope you make this a part of your normal routine and hang out with us all the time. You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning right now. You'll catch on to what we're doing pretty quickly, but if you want to go back to the beginning and power through it and binge the whole thing at some point, you would be absolutely welcome to do that too. One way or another, I'm just glad you're all here. And today, I would like to start with a complaint. I don't like the saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat, because I like cats, and they're fuzzy and adorable, and I have two of them, and I particularly love one of those two cats, and his name is Tormund, and he rubs his face against my face all the time, and we cuddle, and when I'm not there and then I get back after a while, he misses me. I don't want that animal to get skinned. But I'll tell you what I do want to do is fish. So you could just as easily make that saying into there's more than one way to catch a fish, because that's true. And nobody has to die in that scenario. You can just put the fish back. But I'm like 86% sure that if you skin a cat, it dies from that. So my analogy is much stronger. And for somebody like me, when I picture fishing, catching a fish, I picture a fly rod. And I picture this delicious looking, carefully sculpted little fly that imitates what a bug looks like to a fish. And I float it out there and I put it on the current and I make it look just like what food looks like to a fish. And then it sees it, it's like, I am fooled, I'm going to eat that. And then it eats it, and then it hooks into its kind of bony jaw, which I've been told doesn't hurt that much. And I take the hook out and I let it go, and we have this beautiful moment. And that's the end of that. That's one way to catch a fish. Another way to catch a fish is more the bass fishing style, where you got the provocative, big, ugly lure and you try to provoke a strike. You can just irritate the fish again and again in some situations until it finally gets aggressive and hits that thing. But there are other ways to catch a fish even beyond that. You can catch a fish with a throwable net. Have you seen people do this, by the way? It is mind-bogglingly cool. You can just take this net, and it's all like wadded up, and you'll just see some dude on the shore doing the net fishing thing, or off of a dock, you'll see this sometimes, and just boom, out of the hand it goes, and the thing expands real quick, and it's got these little weights on the bottom, and so the net falls into the water super fast, and then there's this draw cord that cinches the bottom of the net with the weights shut real fast, and then before the fish know where to go or how to get out of it, boom, the trap is sprung and it closes in on them, and then you haul the thing up and you got a bunch of fish in there. That's another way to catch a fish. Another way to catch a fish is with a drag net. And a drag net is usually something that you pull behind a moving boat, and you've got weights at the bottom of a drag net that pull part of the net down, but then you have floats on the top of the drag net that keep part of the net up, and then the forward momentum of the boat creates this big, long cone. And any fish that are unfortunate enough to be hanging around by the mouth of that cone will get siphoned back into the end of that cone. And they're like, I can't get out. This is stuck in here. I don't have any plan whatsoever. And then after a little bit of boating around, you get a whole bunch of things stuck in this big drag net, and you pull the thing shut and you go to shore and you pull it out, and there's just all kinds of stuff in there. Some of it's going to be fish that you want to eat, like a red snapper, very delicious. Or maybe you get some things in there that you don't want to eat, like say a boot or a tire or some kind of bony carp fish that just isn't delicious. Well, the way the drag netter does things is they take the fish that they want to keep and they put them over here, and then we're going to eat that or sell that bucket. And then they take the stuff that they don't want and they throw it in the trash bin or in the dispose of that fish or turn it into chum bucket over there. And I really like fishing, so I got like 50 more examples of different ways to catch a fish to convince you that it's a superior metaphor to there's more than one way to skin a cat. But I'm not going to do that. That last example of fishing is the one I really wanted to get to, because I think it's the style of fishing that is being described in the parable of the net in Matthew chapter 13 in this kingdom parable discourse of Jesus. Now, in the first half of the kingdom parable discourse, Jesus is in a boat. So it's kind of funny that he didn't go with the net illustration while he was in a boat. It seems like visual aid-wise that would have really worked for the room. So in the first half of the talk, you stand in the boat, he gives some other parables, like the famous one about the sower and the parable of the wheat and the weeds. But then they wrap up the public part of the speech, and Jesus and his disciples go back into their house in this little town of Capernaum, and the disciples are like, what did that one parable mean? Jesus explains it, and then he goes on to give other parables that obviously, given who's in the room and who's not, are much more targeted to this narrow group of people who have committed their lives to following Jesus around. And after Jesus explains the parable of the wheat and the weeds, and then gives these two little micro parables, one about a hidden treasure, one about a pearl of great value, that both demonstrate the all-inness of the proper response to understanding the value of the kingdom, he then gives them this parable of the net. It goes like this. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into a lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore, and they sat down and collected all the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, with a lot of these parables, you get something of a twist, a surprise. This is a little bit different in terms of formula because there is no twist. It is just the most straightforward example of what normal, everyday commercial fishing would look like. And interestingly, as I mentioned a minute ago, it looks like, he missed this big opportunity for a great visual aid. He could have done the parable of the net while he was standing in a boat. And everyone was like, well, it makes so much sense. This is beautiful integration of your environment. It's wonderful public speaking. But in defense of Jesus' rhetorical decision-making, going with this parable with a room full of people who have been commercial fishermen their whole lives is also pretty on target. I see what he's doing here. So he goes with something they would completely understand, and they're all like, okay, yeah, I get it. You're just describing our jobs. That's what we do. Yep, we get a bunch of garbage fish in there that nobody wants to eat. We get a bunch of good fish in there. I've been to the Sea of Galilee. I've looked at fish in the Sea of Galilee, and in even my brief week or so there, was able to see, right there, that fish would be good eaten as like straight up trout. I mean, delicious. And then I could look a little further and be like, that eel-like catfish thing, I mean, it would eat, that would work. But then I looked a little further while I was out on this one dock near Tiberias, like, that's kind of one of those bony bottom feeder things, and there's a lot of them there. You would definitely get that in a net, but nobody would want to eat that. It's just not worth the work. The amount of physical human energy you expend to bone those things out and get the meat off of it is worth more. It's a greater expenditure than what you would get back from actually eating that stuff. Maybe I exaggerate there, but there's a reason some fish you just don't eat. So the disciples are like, yep, we totally get it. And all Jesus does is very artfully take this thing that the people in the room he's trying to explain something to would completely get, and then without saying the word likewise, he effectively says, likewise, this is how it's going to be at the end of the age. This is how it's going to be at the end of time. Right now, we are in an era where there's this big dragnet, I guess presumably a dragnet of God that is going through the water, and just a bunch of stuff is going to get caught up in that thing. And for the second time in as many pages, Jesus says there's going to be a reckoning and a sorting out that happens at the end of things. Now, I know I've pounded this next point 11 billion times, but I'm going to pound it again. What he is saying here in the kingdom parables, explaining how the kingdom of God is in keeping with all of the stuff that Jesus said very overtly in the first big speech around which the book of Matthew is structured, that being the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5 through 7, where particularly the last chunk of Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through the end, is very explicitly about the judgment of God, and the call is upon Jesus' audience to think carefully about what he's saying and to become kingdom citizens, to be followers of the one true king, and to do so both out of a healthy fear of the judgment of God and out of a proactive excitement about the beauty of the king and the kingdom that they are being invited to participate with. But the parable of the net isn't just evocative of the overt teachings of Jesus about judgment and the end of time and God's authority to do all of that stuff in the Sermon on the Mount. Is also evocative of at least two other parables in the very chapter we're working on right now, Matthew chapter 13, the Kingdom Parables Discourse. And due to time constraints, we are going to have to deal with those similarities and where the parable of the net fits into the larger structure of the Kingdom Parables Discourse that we're working on right now next time around, which is going to be fun. Also, I keep seeing this phrase, weeping and gnashing of teeth, and at some point we're going to do a timeout episode where we step aside and try to figure out what that means and where that's coming from. My beautiful and hyper-intelligent wife, Camilla, has just finished putting together the order for the little field note books that are labeled Matthew that I'm going to be sending out to literally everyone who supports the program at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. She put in that order, and along with that, I think she put a couple new things in the TMBH store. We got like shirts and hats and stuff there. I don't make anything on that. It's just there because people had asked along the way if I would do some kind of merch or something. I was like, sure, and I will just make this as utterly cheap as possible. I think I make like a quarter. But at any rate, we're adding a shirt right now that is very specific to the podcast and some inside baseball language that you and I use here, and that's at thetmbh.com. You're smart. You know how to work the internet. Thank you all for being up for talking shop about the most influential document in the history of humankind, and we'll do more of this next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.